Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of AAU Talks on AAU TV, brought to you by the Association of African Universities. My name is Isabella Teta Henakwa, your sitting host for this episode. We are privileged to have here with us the organizer of the highly anticipated high-level international conference on climate finance and sustainable energy transition in Africa. You know, this conference is going to bring together experts, leaders, and policymakers to discuss crucial topics that is needed to drive Africa to the greener and also more prosperous future. We'll go for a quick break. When we come back, I'll introduce our guests to you and then start with the discussion. Stay tuned. You're welcome back from the break. This is still AAU Talks on AAU TV. If you just tuned in, as I mentioned earlier, today we'll be discussing, we'll be talking about the European University Institute High-Level Conference 2023. And I have here with me Mr. Roland Scott-Best from the European University Institute. You're welcome, Mr. Roland Scott-Best, to AAU Talks.
Pleasure to be here with you, Isabella.
Great. So before we start with the discussion, I'd like you to introduce yourself to us. Tell us more about yourself, what you do, and also about European University Institute.
Indeed, I'm Roland Scott-Best. I'm a communication specialist at the European University Institute, in particular at the School of Transnational Governance, which is part of the Institute. And our mission is to train current and future leaders in governance beyond the state. A lot of the policy making is happening beyond the nation state and the international level, continental level, but also between public and private actors. There's a lot going on, and that's our specialty.
Right. You're welcome once again. Now, about the conference, I know your aim is to discuss issues related to climate finance and also sustainable energy transition in Africa. I'd like to know more the objectives specifically about the conference.
Yeah. So the idea is that we come together to chart a path forward to accelerate transition, the green transition here in Africa. And so we're here in Ghana, a country like many other African countries with a lot of potential for renewable energy. Think about solar, wind and hydro power, but much still needs to be done to actually achieve that potential. For example, there is a lack of adequate funding, but also often there are poor regulatory frameworks to make sure that this can actually be achieved. Just to name one example, less of 2% of the investment worldwide in renewable energy happens in Africa. Well, actually, the worst impacts of climate change are happening here in a continent that has contributed very little to the problem, which is then straight away also the reason why we are here. This is very much an issue that crosses boundaries, crosses borders, and we need to work together. For example, between Africa and Europe, the green transition and access to clean energy is a priority for both continents, and we want to bring together actors from government, policy making, the private sector, civil society, and importantly academia. We heard in a university TV to, based on sound knowledge, come forward with proposals to actually accelerate this transition that is so very much needed.
Yeah, that is very, very good. So the aim is to bring together all these people to look at solutions in terms of climate finance. What is the inspiration behind this conference, and also how significant is it to Africa?
Yeah, a very good question. Basically, on our side in Florence at the European University Institute, this idea was born a few years ago as we were strengthening our engagement with partners around the world, Asia, Africa, and Latin America, to widen the scope of our work beyond Europe. And of course, Africa and Europe have a special and complex relationship, and there's a lot going on that front. And as a research center of excellence in the social sciences, we have a lot to contribute, but also it must be said that from our side, it's really a matter of connecting with partners on the continent to understand what their challenges are and how we can contribute, exchanging ideas, making sure that young people have the opportunities to, for example, to come to Europe. If we talk about African experts, we have a Young African Leaders program where every year a group of experts come to Florence to build their skills, to exchange with peers, to meet experts from Europe and beyond, and go back and grow in their roles as professionals. We have also contributed at the European University Institute to the new creation of the African School of Regulation, with a specific focus of the topic of energy. So it was very natural for us to then say, okay, we need to actually go to the continent, in this case to Accra, Ghana, led by our president, Professor Renaud de Hoes, and our Professor of Sustainable Governance, Kenneth Amaheshi, and to meet these partners, in this case in particular the ACBF, African Capacity Building Foundation, and ISA here at the University of Ghana, and work together, bring together these people to advance the discussion. So that's basically how it was born.
Right. Now, I'm sure someone out there will be asking, what at all is climate finance? Can you explain that to us?
Yeah, indeed, we're talking about the finance that is made available to fund projects that can reduce the impact of climate change, or to prevent them, right? So we're talking about money made available for climate action. That is very much an international conversation, right? For example, at the UNFCCC, that is the climate change framework of the United Nations. And while it is definitely up to Africa to lead the energy transition, and actually Ghana has already made a start. There's a renewable energy plan from 2019. There's an ambition to increase renewable energy 30-fold by 2030, so there's a lot going on. But there is this money available, and it's also up to developed economies to contribute, so to make this finance available, to invest in projects that can reduce the impact of climate change and work towards more sustainable forms of energy and sustainability in general.
Okay. Now, you made mention of Ghana taking a step in terms of climate finance or climate change. Now, in your perspective or in your view, how do you see the current state of Africa in terms of our climate finance?
I think we are very much at the beginning. In fact, one of the key problems that we are addressing with the conference, and then also with the training the following 2 days for mid-career and senior professionals, is that we see that indeed there is inadequate funding maybe, but there's also a lack of bankable projects, so the projects that can be funded. So that is something that the people we will be training, will be focusing on. So how can we make sure that there are projects, that there's a conducive environment for investments, that the projects are there, and that we also develop the skills of the people that need to work on them to make it happen.
Right. Now, aside funding, what other challenges do you think we are facing in terms of Africa?
I think to come back to the climate question, I think there really, we're talking about pollution here. If you drive around Accra, you kind of air pollution is a big theme, but we're also talking about things like droughts and floods, two extreme streams of weather patterns which put crops at risk. So there's also a food security issue. But there's also the question of equity and equality, right? Not everyone on the African continent has the same access to energy, right? So that's also something we need to look at. So the on-grid energy, for example, electricity via the grid, needs to be improved and strengthened, but we also need to think about off-grid solutions for people who are not connected to the grid yet. They also deserve to be connected to our digital global economy, where electricity is key, right? If you want to take opportunities, make something of your life. So I think in that sense there's things are moving. There's a long way to go, but the positive thing is that there's an enormous potential in Africa. This is a country with a lot of sunshine, for example.
Yeah. I was even about to say that we know Africa is blessed when we talk about natural resources. So my next question is, how can we use these natural resources as a solution to climate finance and also sustainable energy transition in Africa?
Yeah. It might be a bit a boring way to start this answer by saying, we need to first make sure that we get the big picture right? That there are the right policies, that there are good regulatory frameworks, that we then indeed scale up those projects that can have a positive impact. If you know, there are, for example, if we talk about EVs, electric mobility, you know, there's a lot happening in that field, but you know, the big part of vehicles circulating here in Ghana, and actually the same is true as in Europe, are still combustion engines, right? They are polluting. So we need to make sure that we, you know, we invest in those opportunities and that we speed up progress in this green transition. And that is actually an issue that we very much have in a discussion, a debate that we very much have at the level of the European Union as well. And I think in that sense, you know, Africa, you know, needs to put all its force behind it to make that transition happen. It is really beneficial, you know, to create jobs, to actually grow, and it is good for people's health, right? You know, a green transition is also something that is good for the well-being of all of us.
Let's come back to the conference. Now, what are some of the topics you've been discussing, and also who are your collaborators or partners? How are they, I mean, helping with this conference?
Yeah, so here in Accra, Ghana, we are partnering with ISER, the Institute for Statistical, Social and Economic Research at the University of Ghana, and with the African Capacity Building Foundation. They have an office here in Accra as well. Their headquarters is in Harare. So it's a great partnership, and by the way, the fourth partner in the endeavor is the African School of Regulation I mentioned before. And the thing is, there's a lot of complementarity there. The African School of Regulation is very much specialized in the question of energy. The African Capacity Building Foundation is strong in building knowledge and offering training opportunities. It's a specialized agency of the African Union in this field. And there's a lot of research going on at ISER here at the University of Ghana. So they are our hosts for the conference. ACBF are the hosts for the training for the next following days, where a smaller group of people will really delve into the topics. And we at the European University Institute and the School of Transnational Governance, we are the ones who have set it all up and try to bring these people together because of our interest in the governance issues which go beyond borders.
Now, what are some of the activities? I made mention, I want to know the topics you'll be talking about, and also some of the activities. You made mention of training. What other things will be, I mean, happening during the conference?
Yeah, we'll start tomorrow the conference with a panel where we're going to be discussing the vision for a sustainable energy transition, the big picture, what is needed, and you know, that's going to be an interesting discussion to really kind of set the scene. And later on, both during the event in the afternoon and during the training, we'll be zooming in on specific subtopics, like, for example, climate finance and the mechanism behind them. We have brought some of our experts from our SDG climate team, the climate team at the School of Transnational Governance. They're very strong in everything that is climate policy at the European and at the international level. So people will be able to, you know, the course participants will be able to appreciate that a lot. There's going to be the focus on regulation, energy regulation, and all that side with, for example, the people of the African School of Regulation. And something that I would especially like to mention that I find really important, tomorrow afternoon we'll have a session focused on the role of youth. Now we are talking about a topic, right? It is about the future, right? We're preparing, leaving behind something for our children, the next generation. And so we should also, you know, ask the youth, you know, what they think is happening, what we should do about it, and involve them in the discussion. So there's an afternoon panel fully dedicated to that, and we're very happy to meet some of our alumni. So basically the young African leaders I mentioned before, who came in the last few years to Florence for this program. Some of them are based in Accra, some of them come from other West African countries. In fact, it's not only an event for people from Ghana, it's broader. There are people from all over Africa joining, in particular West Africa. So this will be something important to zoom in on that factor as well.
I'm really impressed with that. Now, being part of the organizers, what are your expectations and also your desired outcomes from this conference?
I really hope that we will be able to kind of pinpoint, the key issues, zoom in on them, and decide together. So what are the kind of recommendations that we can put forward on where to act, right? And that is something that we do a lot at the European University Institute, right? To kind of, on the basis of sound knowledge and analysis, provide advice to policymakers. So that's where it starts for us. But it's also going to be a great opportunity to meet people and to discuss about the kind of things that we are doing, the projects we are working on, and seeing if there's opportunity for future and further collaboration.
Right. Now, before we wrap up, I'd like to know what are the future plans are there after this? What are the activities are there for people interested in climate finance and also sustainable energy?
Yeah, no, a very good question. There is a lot happening at our university in Florence in Italy, so I would definitely invite people to have a look at our website, which is a very short URL, eui.eu, and we're talking about fellowship programs, where people from around the world can join, for example, the Policy Leader Fellows at the School of Transnational Governance, or specifically the Young African Leaders program. We are expecting our next, the third cohort in September. That's a 3-month program, very intense, loads of skill development, and loads of exchanges with key experts in Europe, in Africa, visits to capitals in Europe, a wonderful experience. But we also have executive trainings happening at our university specifically on these topics. Some of them are online, some of them are actually in Florence.
Yeah. I was about asking whether it's online or location.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is the platform. What do you have a message to our audience out there, inviting them to the conference? Yeah.
Well, I think I'd like to conclude on the note of both people and in particular young people, right? We are both working for, in the academic sphere, and, building knowledge, continued training is of the essence also on this important topic. So, there's a lot of potential in Africa for renewable energy, and it will also have to count on young people who will lead the continent into the future, and the development of their skills is super important. So I would invite people who are watching us, to have a look at the event. In fact, the event is taking place on campus at ISER, and the afternoon session focusing on young people is also accessible online for those who cannot make it to campus.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Roland Scott-Best, and also we wish you all the best. We hope that this conference is going to lead, some significant progress in Africa's sustainable energy. Thank you for coming.
Thanks a lot, Isabella, for having me.
Great. So this brings us to the end of today's discussion, where we talked about a high-level international conference organized by the European University Institute, happening live at the University of Ghana. If you just tune in, you can follow the discussion on our social media handles at Association of African Universities on Facebook and YouTube, AAU_African Universities on Twitter, and also our dedicated website at tv.aau.org. My name is Isabella Teta Henakwa. See you again next time.